Hey folks, Randy Newberg here from snowy and cold Bozeman, Montana. With me is Marcus Hockett, Chief Number 1 production guy, cameraman extraordinaire, elk hunter of the greatest, conqueror of the wilderness.
I don't know about that.
What titles am I forgetting? Skier of Everest.
No, not quite.
Camper of McKinley. Is there anything Marcus won't do as it relates to the wilds?
I'm sure there's things.
Okay. Well, for right now, we're going with like the most badass production guy in the industry. You okay with that? You're kind of modest.
I don't know about that. I feel like there's some people that are operating at a much higher level than me.
Well, that's what I'm going with, Marcus. So that's what you're stuck with today. So,
all right.
Since I'm the guy who hosts the podcast, that's just how it's going to be today. I was a guest on Ron Boehm's podcast this morning, so I almost feel like I'm talked out. I already got a sore throat, and we haven't even got started, but we are way behind, Marcus.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to the audience. Yeah. We were supposed to have one released on Christmas Day. And we're recording this on what, January 3rd?
Yep.
Yeah, we moved on. So since the last podcast, we got home. And here's the details of what slowed everything down. We moved offices. So we're in a new office now. Congress passed a tax bill the Monday before Christmas. And those of you who know that I'm a CPA in my other life, you may not understand what a new tax bill means to the world of CPAs, but CPAs get no sleep once a new tax bill comes out. So you probably saw the effects of that on me, Marcus, as I was
definitely
kind of, my blood pressure was a little higher, walking around, stumbling, bumbling, talking to myself. But so I didn't have a lot of free time between the time that tax bill changed or got passed and the end of the year, because the other part about being a CPA is every client wants to solve all their problems before December 31st because you can't backdate anything.
Right.
So you add all that, and then we had the holidays, and then we had New Year's.
Yeah, it just kind of piles up.
How did we get it? Did we get anything done? You probably did.
I hope I got at least a little bit done. But
yeah. No, I know you did. I didn't get anything done. We sent Michael back to Ohio for Christmas.
Yeah,
so,
but he's been getting stuff done.
I know.
He's been uploading stuff. So
I've been seeing it on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I think next week we're gonna let that rip on YouTube.
Sounds good.
That Montana one.
Cool.
I hope. Anyhow, but it's. I guess my apologies, folks, for being late. We're going to try to get caught up. You might hear a few of these podcasts stacked back to back to back here in January, trying to get caught up because we've got a ton of things going on with. Let's see, we did your Wyoming elk application yesterday, did mine this morning. It's application and research season.
Yeah, right into it.
Yeah, which for us, that's like a season. If people saw my whiteboard at home of all the, it's like this big matrix of states and species and us and on our crew, who we're going to have as guest hunters. It's chaos. But
and hopefully we'll be making some videos following along with that as well.
Yeah, we're going to be doing some videos of, and this is something we're going to do with Go Hunt, kind of a state by state of everything we do. If you got lots of points, no points, how it works, what states to think about. So we're going to do a bunch of them with them because they got a great resource. And then we're going to hopefully have some tags so we can go film.
Hopefully.
Something other than grouse shooting. I mean, I'm fine if all we do this fall is film grouse shooting.
Yeah. Well, we'll get our Montana elk tags. We know that.
We'll get Montana elk and deer. That's a guarantee. And other over-the-counter things, well, you're going to Arizona. You got a leftover archery javelina tag, you and Kara.
Yep.
I've got an over-the-counter deer tag, me and David Brinker from Sitka. So there's always something we can go do if we don't. draw the tags that we apply for.
For sure.
But anyhow, folks, before we jump into this, we better thank the great companies that make this possible. There's a reason this is called Leupold's Hunt Talk Radio, is because Leupold supports everything we do. We hunted with Bruce Pettit, the CEO, last October, and his wife Tracy. And Tracy, we went to New Mexico, and Tracy shot a beautiful bull. That was one of the coolest encounters we've ever filmed.
Yeah, that was really exciting.
Yeah, you were filming it. I bet you it was. I was over the hill doing the call, and I couldn't tell what was going on. But if you want to see it, you can go out to our day-by-day stuff on our YouTube channel, and that is there. But Bruce and Tracy were so great. It was a tough hunt. It was that night walking out that first night in the dark for 3 hours.
Without an elk on our back.
Without an elk. It took us 3 hours to climb out of this burned canyon. And I don't know what you were thinking or Tyler was thinking or Bruce and Tracy, but I was frustrated.
And then, unfortunately, it didn't come across as much on the footage, but, man, some of those places that we were walking over, it was
sketchy.
Yeah, it was very sketchy. There was some drop-offs, and if you slipped, you're going to be going for a while.
Yeah, we didn't want anyone to fall because we'd have to leave them there. But you're right, it didn't come off on video. Well, it's just because it's so dark. Yeah, I know we got our headlamps. But, anyhow, Leupold, great company. They love everything about the public land thing we do, the self-guided on your own thing we do, and can't thank them enough for all their support for this podcast, the TV shows we've done in the past, the YouTube channel, you name it. So if you're in the market for optics, folks, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a company that supports the hunting world and shooting world better than Leupold does. So Leupold.com. Go there. Get you some. And then we already made a mention of the Go Hunt guys, GoHunt.com. And a lot of you hear me talk about Go Hunt and how I use it. But when you see this series of videos we're producing, the idea of them, we've done it somewhat in the past, but we're going to get into it even deeper this year because every year Go Hunt adds new features. Like this year they have the public-private land feature that I think they launched that in October. But now they've got a lot of the draw odds for cows, for antlerless tags, and for bighorn ewe tags.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there who they want to know what their odds are if they want to go get a cat tag. So
yeah, absolutely.
Every year they're adding new stuff, and their strategy articles are really, really good. So we're going to be doing this whole series of videos with them about the key western states. And the western states we're going to cover are Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. Did I miss any? I might have. I don't think I did, but anyhow, those are the states off the top of my head I know we're going to be working on. And when we do that, we just want to make sure that everybody knows how accessible some of these opportunities are. I mean, where we drew in Wyoming last year where you shot that bull.
Yeah.
How or why more people aren't applying for that, I don't know. Maybe they don't have the Go Hunt service. Opening morning, you shot a bull.
Yeah.
And I think if we wouldn't have got blizzarded out, I mean, I almost shot one that night.
Yeah, it was close.
I think if we would have had a couple more days, I think we would have filled both tags.
Yeah, the blizzard that came in kind of changed things up a bit. We got a little unlucky with that one.
Yeah. But still, for a hunt like that where you can go hunt September 20th with a rifle.
Oh, yeah, it's unreal.
Yeah. I think last year it took, depending on if you were in the regular draw or special draw, it took a half point or 1 point or something. Anyhow, those are the kind of gems that we find by using Go Hunt. And if you go to GoHunt.com and you sign up for their insider service, you're going to get a $50 credit in their gear shop if you use promo code Randy. So every promo code we have with our sponsors is Randy, R-A-N-D-Y. So GoHunt.com, and you're going to hear a lot about it. going forward, just because especially in application season, their odds, their research, their strategy articles are, they are the best out there. And I subscribe to every service there is, just because I want to see what other people are saying and doing and use it to avoid certain places. But a few years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago when Go Hunt started, I thought, this sounds too good. This sounds like what Randy Newberg's been looking for 20 years, because I've been doing this so long. Well, it turned out to be what I thought it was. So the other company, Onyx Maps, I wonder if Onyx charged me a per minute use fee, I'd go broke. Yeah. Because when I'm doing all this research stuff, on one screen over here I got my Onyx, and on the other screen over here I got Go Hunt. And every unit that Go Hunt, kind of when I do my filtering, they pop up. The very first thing I do is I pull it up in Onyx. And I have the wilderness layer on, I have the fire layer on, I have the roadless layer on, and I'm just trying to see, are those the kind of places that we would hunt?
Oh yeah, I catch myself just pulling it up and like entertaining myself with it. It used to be before Onyx, it was Google Earth, and now it's Onyx. I just pull it up and I'll just start zooming in, just random places, looking at the satellite, like trying to figure out where a good spot to go would be. And yeah, it's a crazy tool.
Yeah, it goes, and I say this a lot, and I think people who use it the way we do say, how did I hunt without it? Yeah, we hunted without it, but the effectiveness and the places we confidently are able to access now, it's a night and day difference. So, but if you want 20% off their app products, their Hunt app products, again, use promo code Randy, and onyxmaps.com is going to give you 20% off. And then Orion coolers. Boy, we've been living out of those for a long time. It's amazing now how many years I've had those coolers and they don't look any worse for wear. Other than one of them, we must have did some gutting and gilling on the cover. Because they've got those padded covers on the top. And I think
something happened down there.
Yeah, I'm going to get it scrubbed off, but it's been so cold since we got home. I haven't had a chance to clean them up the way I normally do, but orioncoolers.com, great coolers, the best coolers out there. And when we go to Arizona in a couple weeks, we're going to be living out of coolers again.
Yeah.
We live out of coolers a lot.
Yeah, this kind of comes with the territory, I guess.
Yeah, when Michael and I were coming back from Arizona last month, we were kind of debating, as we were doing the math, we couldn't remember if we were on day 109 or 110 that I'd been away from home last year. That's a lot. And not all of those are living out of coolers, but the majority of them are.
Right.
And so orioncoolers.com, go there, and if you buy one of their great coolers and use promo code Randy, they have this really cool Hunt Talk tumbler that you'll get for free, and you will have the best cooler you could ever find. So, where do we want to start, Marcus? We the way we do this is I kind of accumulate topics that are recurring and people want to ask us and ask about. Like tonight, we'll be doing the Elk Talk Live thing that Bowtech does with us. Mm-hmm. Well, Bowtech, Loophole, Onyx, Go Hunt, Tight Spot, Ripcord, Black Gold. I think we're going to get Rocky Mountain hunting calls in there. Nice. Yeah. But tonight, we're going to continue our discussion about how to hunt elk every year. And a lot of those are the same questions. It's hard to filter out some of the questions because they're
there's definitely some repetitive aspects of it, but then I don't know. There's new viewers, and then there's the loyal viewers, and it's hard to know who to please.
Yeah, but by doing it, the good part about doing that is we get to see the same question time and time again. That helps us know where we can do, I guess, better work, provide information that is most helpful. And so when we're doing the podcast, I keep these little cheat sheets. I keep this file open in my computer. And whenever something comes up of, we ought to talk about that on the podcast, we kind of add the list. So I think today we're going to go through some of those things. In the last month, a lot of them end up being public land issues because when we were down in Arizona, Michael and I were hunting with Jerry Pritchard. Jerry had the tag, and the Gerber guys were with us. That was when the big announcement happened about monuments. So today on the podcast, we're going to talk about public land, advocacy, monuments. We'll probably have, by the time we're done, we'll probably have pissed off every viewer from every end of the political spectrum.
Perfect.
We'll have one download of the next podcast, and it'll be me.
There you go.
But with December 31st coming, that was our last airing after 9 years on outdoor TV. Whew. How long have you been with this gig, Marcus?
I mean,
third year?
Yeah, I did a couple of this kind of hunts on 3 years ago, and then 2 years now.
Yeah. I've been doing this 9 years of TV, and we filmed our 10th year this year. But we bid a fond farewell to the folks at Sportsman's Channel. They've hosted us there, let us be there for 5 years. 7 years. 2 years on Outdoor Channel before that. So you won't be seeing us out on TV anymore by design.
Right. I think a lot of people weren't watching on TV anyway.
No,
because now that the platforms are on the internet.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who already cut the cord.
Yeah.
Including me.
I know. So people your age, Marcus is 27, soon to be 28. Your generation, it's an oddity for someone to subscribe to a TV, cable, or satellite package.
Yeah, none of my friends have a satellite dish or anything like that.
Yeah.
There's no...
And that's not just a dynamic of outdoor TV. That's just TV in general.
Yeah.
TV viewership, traditional TV is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and it has been. And so we started our YouTube channel January of 2016, I think, at SHOT Show. Yeah, we put our first episode up live. We dabbled in it for a couple months before that, but we put our first episode up live January 15th of 2016, so slightly less than 2 years ago. And then after 9 months of trial and error and struggle and hurdle, Matthew was able to get us on Amazon in late August of 17, I think it was, something like that. So in 2 years, TV went from 100% of our viewership to now, December 31st, our last airing on outdoor TV, it's less than 20%.
It's crazy.
In just 2 years.
Yeah.
So we just, for the value of what we want to accomplish for our partners, our sponsors, for the message we want to get out about public lands and self-guided hunting, we got to be where the audience is. Mm-hmm. And the audience is digital. I don't know how else to say it. It'd be nice to have stayed on outdoor TV, but a lot of people may not know that in outdoor TV, how the model works is producers like me go to the network and we buy time slots. And those time slots come with X number of commercial units. And so the pricing is based on the viewership at that time slot. If you want the prime time slots, you're going to pay more. If you want 6 commercial units or 10, you're going to pay more for 10 commercial units than 6. So to give folks an idea of what the cost is, in my 9 years of outdoor TV, my payment to the network each year, the lowest it ever was $52,000 a year. The highest it ever was $185,000 in a year. So when you have that range, even if you're on the low end of that range, it's hard to justify paying that kind of money when it's less than 20% of your viewership.
Yeah.
And the viewership is shrinking. The networks, I don't know, maybe they have numbers that say differently. There'll always be outdoor TV. It's got its purpose. Everyone always said, "Oh, print is going away as quick as online came. Oh, print is dying." It shrank, and it had to adapt.
Right.
And a lot of the people who couldn't adapt fell by the wayside. And I think the same with TV. I mean, TV's always going to be there. Mm-hmm. It has to adapt and be different. But so, folks, that's big news for us. Our sponsors are supporting us. They're behind us all the way. Randy Newberg Hunter is the YouTube channel. And I always have to tell people this. If you subscribe to YouTube, it doesn't cost anything. It's free. And then Amazon, well, so here's kind of how it's going to work. And it's all commercial free. So that's one of the things. And our content has always been pretty product intensive, heavy integration. And you know that, Marcus, because the way that I'm always saying, now shoot it this way, or make sure you capture that, or this angle. And the idea that we've always had is we want people to know what product we're using and how we're using it without having to do the stand-up infomercial.
Yeah.
I would not have killed this buck without the blah, blah, blah. We will never do that. We never have. So for us, pretty much everybody knows what we use because we try to be tasteful in how we integrate it.
Yeah.
And so we're able to go commercial free because on TV, how many of you who have TV sit and watch the 30-second commercials?
Yeah, I bet a lot of people have the DVR or TiVo or whatever it's called.
Right. Or when the commercial segment comes on, they switch to a different channel and then they come back.
Or they're on their Instagram or whatever. Yeah. Right. Not paying attention, not getting any of that.
Yeah. So with Amazon and with YouTube, you get all this commercial free. So hopefully you appreciate that we respect your time. And now this is our first year where everything's going to be on Amazon. So the stuff we filmed in 2017, the kind of polished, pretty well-edited episodes that would be similar to what you saw on TV are going to Amazon first. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to sit there and for, I don't know, I still haven't decided if it's going to be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever. Once they've been there for a while, then we're going to put them on YouTube also. So that if someone doesn't have an Amazon Prime subscription, even though there's supposedly 90 million households in the United States that have Amazon Prime, how many households are there in the United States?
I don't know. That's a
lot. I know some people don't have Amazon Prime, so they won't get it for free. So to make sure that we can cover that, we are also putting it on YouTube a few weeks later. Plus also, Amazon Video Direct for small producers like us, you have 4 options. You can make it live in United States, UK, Germany, and Japan. But for each of them, you got to there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through for each country. You got to do new closed captioning, all kinds of stuff. So our Amazon Prime right now is only available in the United States. So that's where YouTube serves another purpose is it's available worldwide. So we got a ton of followers from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Europe. They'll still be able to get it. They'll just have to wait till it gets to YouTube. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see. We're going to experiment with shorter content. On the one podcast Michael and I did, we did a road trip podcast. We asked the audience, let us know if you want longer content because we don't want to ask you to sit there if you don't want to watch longer content. Not everybody replied, obviously, but those who did, just about all of them said, yeah, I'd be interested in 30, 40, 45 minutes, if that's what it takes to tell a story. So.
Well, and that's the beauty of it, too, is there's no time constraint. So if we can take as much time as it takes to tell the story well. And if that's an hour, that's an hour. If it's 15 minutes, it's 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Whatever content we got, whatever story is there, that's how long it'll be.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to stretch it out or compress it, because that's what always happens with that 22 minutes or whatever it is for TV.
Yeah.
You're going to either be compressing and cutting out a bunch of the really cool parts of the story, or maybe, usually this doesn't happen, but if there's not much there, then you're stretching it out to reach to that 22 minutes.
Which you don't want to waste people's time either. If it only deserves 12 minutes, only do 12 minutes. Mm-hmm. And the other part is, a lot of times you're telling the story and you get the flow of the story going, and the network has these guidelines of how we have to do it, because how they make their money and how we recover our costs is by selling commercial units on TV. So they say, all right, between minute 5 and minute 8, you need a 3-minute commercial block or a 2-minute commercial block. Well, that disrupts the story. And so when you come back, you kind of got to refresh the viewer. Hey, here's where we were at in the story. So right there, you lose some time just due to the redundancy of how you're trying to.
Yeah, you're building the story around the commercial slots.
Yeah, it's completely unnatural. But I understand the model, and that's how it, every model has to pay for itself. Mm-hmm. So it's not a criticism. It's just a better, I guess, platform for us if we want to tell longer, uninterrupted, commercial-free stories about hunting. Yeah. What we do and how we do it. And this is kind of fun. It's like the Wild West. In some respects, I feel like, when you read the journals of Lewis and Clark, and when they first climb up out of the bluffs of the Missouri River out there by Wolf Point, and they talk about looking over looking across the prairie when they climbed up out of the river. There were millions of bison, or bison as far as the eye could see. I kind of feel that way right now about having these digital platforms. The sideboards are gone. It's whatever Marcus in his creative mind can come up with.
I don't know if that's just me. I hope not all of that burden is going to be put on me.
No, it won't be all on you. We got Michael, we got Marcus, and then a lot of people don't know is we have a guy named Chad Cool he's edited all of our TV shows for years and years. He's based in Minnesota. So we have a lot of resources, but it's going to be fun to experiment. Yeah. And see what the feedback is. So I just checked on the unique streams is what they call it in Amazon. In YouTube, they call it views. Since we announced this 2 days ago, the number of unique streams we have received on Amazon is crazy. So that tells me there are a lot of people who enjoy the viewing experience and will go watch content on Amazon.
Cool.
Especially if you have a smart TV.
Oh, yeah.
The viewing experience on Amazon is going to be a higher quality viewing experience than on TV, because most of the outdoor networks, if you look at most of their coverage areas, they don't distribute in HD in a lot of their areas. Whereas the files we have to send to Amazon, they have to be at the highest possible resolution. So, and now you shot all those films this year in 4K.
Yep, which is a whole new beast.
So the stuff that we filmed this year is going to be, we shot at an even higher resolution.
Yeah, at least some of the YouTube videos we've been putting up are in 4K.
Yeah, so, they are.
Most people probably can't really get the most out of that but if people are watching on 4K TVs, or a lot of computers are starting to have 4K monitors, then they definitely will see the benefit.
Yeah, and hopefully you have a connection speed that can handle it, because Matthew's moose hunt, when we did the day by day, flaked out on the 4K file, and the Arizona wilderness elk hunt flaked out on the 4K file.
Yeah, because most of the days I did export in 4K. Yeah. And then one of them just refused to work, and I don't know if that was an issue on my end or the issue on YouTube's end, but I couldn't figure it out. We needed to get it out. So.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but we've had 2 of them.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if it's on my end. I've been reading a lot of blogs and threads about issues that could be causing it, and I've not solved it yet.
You know what we ought to do someday? And this just came to mind as you were saying it. We should do a walkthrough of a YouTube video about what it takes to go film a piece of content. Well, first, come up with the idea, script it, storyline it, film it again, bring it to the office, download the footage.
A YouTube video about making a YouTube video?
Yeah, timelining it.
I feel like everyone's different, though. I mean,
yeah.
There's some structure, obviously, but
there's a lot of structure.
But it's a little different depending on what we're making. And
well, it's true. Yeah. I mean, if it's informational, it kind of has one flow, one tone. Yeah. If it's advocacy, it kind of has another. Is it a standalone or is it a part of a series? Yeah. Or there's, I mean, for us, we really got to break it down into the category. Is it entertainment? Is it education and information, or is it advocacy? Mm-hmm. Those are really our three content forms.
Yeah, and sometimes there's crossover between all of those. But right. Yeah.
But now we're adding the fourth content form that you're in charge of.
The films.
Films.
Yeah.
That's why. So here's how it works, folks. Marcus and Michael come in the office, and we have this board over here that says supplies, gear, and equipment. And they're like, well, if we're going to do this film stuff, we need this camera and these lenses and these batteries. And you do not want your wife to see that charge on your credit card without advance warning. It's a very, very large charge. So we have some screaming high-end equipment that we've been doing this film stuff with. But the one thing I didn't realize, but you probably did, is how much resource, computer technology resource it's going to take for storage of that high quality footage.
Yeah, you need hard drives and then the computer that can handle it. And
yeah.
Just, it's a different workflow. And I mean, it's the first major transition I've gone through since I've started working on it. But I think every person who's worked in the profession of video goes through this transition of, when it probably went from film to digital, and then when it went from 720 to 1080, and when it's going from 1080 to 4K is what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
But this it's all, I mean, you don't realize exactly what it's going to be like until you just get it. Actually start editing and piecing it together, and it definitely requires more equipment, more space, more hard drive space, faster computers, all of that.
Yeah. I mean, even when we're out in the field, people don't realize that every night you guys are backing up footage.
Yeah. Because
we cannot afford to go and film an important day of the story and not have redundant backups in multiple places. Say those cards crap the bed and we hadn't backed it up on other drives.
Yep.
Bad. We're going to have a story that says day 1, day 2. Oh, day 3, we lost those video cards or those SD cards crapped on us, and you're just going to have to assume what happened that day. So you guys are doing that out in the field, and just the whole 4K thing. I mean, it's no longer.
It was a little. I mean, I knew it was going to be a transition, and then we're going to have to adapt. But I didn't realize quite how much.
Yeah, because
the first few days I used the camera when we were backpacked in Arizona, and I was already gonna head out anyway because I was picking up Ty at the airport. But I went to Best Buy and had to buy another hard drive 3 days into the hunt because I didn't realize how big the files were gonna be.
Right, and the amount of time it takes for them to download.
Oh
So you guys are getting far less rest.
Yeah.
Not that you guys got a lot of rest to start with, but so if we were doing this in a studio or in an office, not that big a deal. I mean, we'd make it work, but you start doing it out in a tent at 10,000 feet in the Kachina Peaks wilderness of Arizona. And all of a sudden you got a lot of complications. You got battery issues, you got storage issues, you got how many drives, how many copies do I need to make?
Oh yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah.
But hopefully it'll be worth it. That's what I'm excited. We've already started to put out some of this 4K stuff, and then if we do actually show some of these films on a big screen, which I hope that happens,
We will.
then I hope that the quality will show through.
I hope you're right, because you really worked your butt off. You did a lot of extra work, carried a way bigger camera, bigger tripod, multiple lenses, more batteries, different media cards, just to do this. So if this doesn't work, we're going to say, what the hell were we thinking?
Well, and then, there's also the learning curve of using a new camera too. So I'm sure there's some kinks in there, but no, I think it'll be cool. I think, cause we've got 2 different films that have been shot already, that have already been filmed, right. They just need to be pieced together. And then we got another one in the works, hopefully next August.
Yeah,
right?
Part of it's been filmed. Tyler went to Alaska in November and did some of it.
Yeah.
So we're doing a film about public lands that revolves around, it's through the hunter's eye. It's a story about hunting elk on public land, but it's very public land centric. Wouldn't you agree? The Arizona elk one? Yeah.
You talked a lot about just what it means to be in the backcountry and what it means to be in those types of places.
Yeah. And how...
And we talked about this a little bit on the podcast with Ty when we were still down there, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's... So I'm excited for that.
Our goal, and this is really putting the heat on Marcus, we're trying to convince backcountry hunters and anglers that we'll have that ready if they want to show it at the rendezvous in April. You think we can do that?
I sure hope so. We'll have something put together for sure. Hopefully it'll be something that they would actually want to show.
Yeah.
I'll have something put together.
Okay. So we're going to do that film, and so it's going to premiere in some places like events and gatherings is where most of these will premiere. And then they will go to Amazon. And then from Amazon, they'll go to YouTube.
Cool.
So there'll be plenty of places for people to watch this. The downside is with all the audio stuff we're doing and the 4K stuff, if they have to watch it on a low connection speed somewhere, they're not going to get the full...
Yeah.
The quality aspect of the production. They're still going to get the message and the story.
Yeah, it's still kind of storytelling in a different way than the traditional TV episode or even our day-by-day content stuff. Like we're definitely telling the story in a little different way.
Yeah. And then we already did captured most of the stuff for the Wild Sheep Foundation, that film that we're doing about this is a hard message. We've been working on this just this week. We've been reshooting and recording and re-scripting how we want to say what we're trying to say. And it's not as easy as it seems.
No.
I think when people see the final product, they'll be like, oh man, that couldn't have been that hard. It's hard. But the idea is that we want to show that if you are engaged and involved in conservation, you do it because that's what's in your heart. And the wild sheep advocates really exemplify that, because in the lower 48, what were we calculating? Across the board, your odds are probably less than 1% each year that you're going to draw a tag.
A wild sheep tag.
Wild sheep tag in the lower 48. So why do these people donate so much of their time and their money and their advocacy for a cause where your odds are less than 1%, even if you apply 40 times in your life? And if you do simple math and say, well, each year I had a 0.8% chance, so cumulatively I had a 32% chance that I would draw over those 40 years, that's still not that great odds.
Right.
Using that math, 1 out of 3 of us in our lives are going to draw.
Of people who really apply.
So why do people go and put so much of their time and their money and their advocacy for the cause of a species they're really never going to get to hunt?
Yeah, and that's the story we're trying to tell. I mean, it's I think there's everyone has different reasons, but that's
Yeah.
what we're trying to get at, and really tell the story of Nevada, specifically of all the projects that people have done on the ground work and advocacy and, all of that.
Yeah.
But in Nevada is really unique because there has been a lot of on the ground work with water developments and translocations and all sorts of stuff that, we as humans messed up the landscape, and now we're working to fix it.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, those are people who aren't really, they probably won't ever get to hunt one of those sheep, but they're just passionate about the resource and passionate about the bighorn. So they give their time and their money and everything.
So that's a story we're trying to tell, and it's a big story. It's got so many pieces you could follow down so many paths, and it really requires pulling your mind back to, all right, how do I tell them the basics of this story so that people can watch it and understand it and follow it. And I underestimated how big of a challenge that was going to be, but I'm really happy with where we're at with it, what we got for footage, what we have for a story there. We're lucky that I went to college in Nevada, so I know a lot of people there who are involved in this stuff. I hunt there a lot. We've got some great friends and great helpers in Nevada Scott and Curtis and Ely, and he was there on our deer hunt last year or year before. Mike lived there for quite a while. He's the guy who had the tag in this hunt. And this film is going to be less about the hunt and more about advocates.
Right.
Being an advocate.
Yeah, I don't even know if we mentioned the fact that, there's going to be some hunt, a bighorn sheep hunt integrated to some extent, but that's not the center of the story. Yeah. But it's going to be, it's still part of it. But.
Right. The real question is, when you have human pressures like invasive weeds like cheatgrass, you have long-term drought, whatever you want to call it, climate change, global warming, I don't care what you want to call it, it impacts the landscape. You got pinyon juniper encroachment. You have a new fire cycle that's brought in by cheatgrass and what that does to native habitats. And then you got competition from wild horses. You add all those together, and the amount of water that used to be on the undisturbed Nevada landscape compared to what it is today, it's a night and day difference.
Yeah.
And so we as humans are having our decisions of, okay, we're not going to manage horses, or, okay, we're going to suppress fire, or we're going to use fire in this way versus that way, or whatever it can be. Human pressure has impacted that landscape so visibly. It's more noticeable there than most other landscapes we go to. How is it then in 30 years, the number of wild sheep in Nevada has quadrupled? When you stack all those things against the sheep, you'd think, how are there any left?
Yeah.
But rather than crashing and becoming extinct, they're in way more places than they used to be. As far as if you look at a map of their historic range, they've occupied through, what do you call it, relocation, translocation, I don't know.
Yeah.
Putting sheep back on the mountain. Through that process, now they have occupied way more of their historic range than they had 30 years ago. Their total numbers have quadrupled. How does something like that happen when you have so many things stacked against them?
Right. And I don't even know if, I don't know the answer to that question yet. And that's part of what we're going to hopefully answer the question for ourselves and then pass it on to the viewer through this film.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with talking with different people, and we're, obviously we have an idea of kind of the story, but we're learning as we go too. Yeah.
Every time we talk to someone or research this person or that project, it's like, whoa, had no idea. So by the time it's all done, that film we hope is going to premiere January of 19 at the Wild Sheep Foundation. That's the goal. The short version of it will. Yeah. The longer version will premiere wherever we decide we want to put it. And it's all about what it means to be a conservationist, what it means to say, I believe in conservation, i.e. putting your money where your mouth is. And the thread we've latched onto for the arc of the story on that one is Roosevelt's famous line of, the wildlife and the habitat cannot speak, so we must and we will. And you look at the cause of wild sheep, and it's not just in Nevada, but think about our buddy Terry Myers in the Rocky Mountain Bighorn Society in Colorado. What they've done, what the Montana Wild Sheep Foundation has done for sheep here.
All across the West.
Across the West, sheep are just a great example of people speaking for the wildlife and its habitat.
Yeah. And that being said, it's not like we should stop now. There's still a long ways to go.
Right.
I mean, there's still a lot of unoccupied sheep habitat that they can get back on if we keep working.
Yeah. And the other challenge that the sheep world has is, so in the elk world or the deer world or the duck world, the ability to participate is really common. It's not like only 1% of people each year who apply get to go deer hunting or get to go elk hunting.
Yeah.
So,
or even with birds.
Yeah.
Basically anybody can go hunt ducks every year.
Right. So it's way easier to build a base of advocates.
Yep.
When it's something they know they're going to get to do every year. Mm-hmm. And they build this culture, this passion, this lifestyle around it. That's not an easy task. To go to someone and say, the odds are you're probably never going to get to hunt these, but how about you pony up $1,000, or how about you give 40 hours of your time, or that's a way harder proposition. So that's why we're using the sheep world for this, and we just lucked out that our buddy Mike drew a sheep tag in the year that we wanted to tell this story. Otherwise, how would we have told the story? I guess we'd still go and tell it. We just would have had to call someone who had a sheep tag and said, hey, can we impose on you? Because we got this really cool story we want to tell. And our last story is the one you mentioned, last film. We'll capture the last of it when we go up to Alaska.
Yeah.
And hunt Sitka blacktail in August.
Yep.
That one's going to be cool. Our buddy Jim Bachtel. If you go out to our Amazon channel and you look at season 3, I think it's episodes 1 and 2 are when he brought me up to he calls it Nirvana. Yeah. It's this special place that, it is a absolute train wreck trying to get in there. Most people, I know if I had not, seen some of Jim's pictures and heard some of his stories, and if I didn't have so much trust in Jim, I might have turned around and said, you know what, I don't need it this bad. But we didn't turn around. We went there and we had just a fantastic hunt, even though we only had a 2-day window of weather to do it. Those deer are special, and the landscape is special, and that landscape is as resilient as it looks. Has a lot of pressures on it also. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of people there to, just in terms of numbers of people, their voice on behalf of the deer is not as loud as it is for other species. So we're going to talk about these special deer, how the local communities have built a subsistence culture around those deer. Mm-hmm. And how important that is, that we keep those deer in mind for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting story. And I'm again still learning about it. All these things that go on.
Well, in August, you're going to get to do a lot of hands-on learning of it.
I'm excited. Lug all that film equipment up that.
Yeah, I think mountain. We need some Sherpas on that hunt. We definitely need to bring some WPAs on that hunt. It's impractical for you and Tyler.
Well, and Tyler's going to be hunting.
Right, Tyler's going to be archery hunting. I'm going to be rifle hunting. Jim's going to be muzzleloader hunting.
Yeah.
And we're going to carry camps, and we're going to carry all this production gear for 6-8 hours of climbing through misery.
Yeah, it might be helpful.
I think we might need some WPAs on that hunt.
Now you're going to get another
Sherpas.
inundation of emails.
Applications of emails.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of where we're going with all this. That's my analogy of it being the Wild West of Lewis and Clark seeing this landscape and like, wow, nobody's here. Not saying others aren't doing stuff like that, but there really are no boundaries in the digital platform that we just decided to jump to. Well, it's not like we decided overnight. We've been working on this plan for a couple of years. So
yeah. And I'm really excited to see how the films go. I mean, to see if people like that and if that's something that we're going to continue. I hope so. I mean, I think there's so many cool stories to tell that I think it is just a little more powerful if you can do it in a cinematic way, with the right people and the right stories.
With those who are listening, if you have a really cool public land story in your backyard, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah.
Contact at randynewberg.com is how you would send that. I don't give my wife's email address anymore. She got inundated with emails the last time I gave Kim's email address. So contact at randynewberg.com. But here's why we're interested. I've been very involved in conservation and public land issues in the West, even more specific in the Northern Rockies. So we've got some really cool stories we're trying to tell here, and they're just going to be 8 to 10 minute stories about public lands we take for granted that really have a cool story. Somebody stood up and spoke and risked a lot for that public land, for that access, for that river, for whatever it is. And we got 2 of them lined up that we're trying to at least get footage shot and interviews done. But can you imagine how many of those stories there must be in this country?
Just thinking, just right around Bozeman. I mean, how many stories you've told me about that I didn't even know about, and I lived in Southwest Montana my entire life, and just to think about that, how many people have stories similar to the ones you have and that we've heard from others. There's a lot of cool stories out there that need to be told. I mean,
I think part of the responsibility of those of us who lived some of those stories is to tell how it happened.
Yeah.
Because I know I took it for granted, and then all of a sudden, Posowitz and other guys who'd been there fighting the battles started telling me about it. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Like, oh no. Oh boy, you should have seen this big Donnybrook here, boy. Someone got fired and 2 people got divorced, and it's like, whoa. But every piece of our public landscape, I bet you, has some story that needs to be told.
Yeah.
Whether it's a river, whether it's a species, a trailhead, a public access, whatever it is. So if any of you have those kind of cool stories about some people, whether they're still alive or since passed, that did remarkable things that you think is a forgotten story that needs to be told, let us know about it. Because as we go forward, that's part of the content we want to produce. And our partners, our sponsors, they love it. They're like, Randy, those are cool stories. Those are stories that explain the heritage, the culture, the legacy of being a hunter, being connected to conservation, and the way that hunting connects us to these lands. So, you're going to be a busy guy, Marcus.
I'm excited for that.
I don't think you needed to apply for Wyoming elk yesterday. I don't think you're going to get any time.
Yeah.
So that kind of gets us into the next piece that we've been talking about. And I can't say that we've had a formal conversation about it. We just sit here in the office, and when topics come up, the 3 of us are talking to each other while we're working on projects. And to me, that gets to all these public land things and about being an advocate. Being a public land advocate. I don't know how to get into this without pissing off some people. I'm sure by the time I'm done, my rant, if you want to call it that, I'm going to smile the whole time through this, Marcus, so it doesn't seem like a rant, okay? But I'm sure it's going to upset some people when I give my thoughts and ideas of what I see and where I think we can do better.
Yeah.
And you hear it from me all the time because you got to sit here and work next to me. You should get paid extra for the days when Randy's PO'd and has something on his mind, because you probably have to sit there, go home, tell your wife, I think the guy's over the edge, man. He's off the rails.
Nah.
You would tell me if I was off the rails, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, you're good.
All right.
You're good.
So, because this is going to get very political, and I do not like the fact that public land issues have become political, partisan political. They've always been political, but now they're partisan. Mm-hmm. And it sucks. It just flat out sucks that one side or the other drags a conservation issue or a public land issue or a hunting issue into the political arena. And when they do it, they don't drag it in from a bipartisan standpoint. They drag it in from a partisan standpoint. So before I get into that, people are going to say, well, Newberg, what are your slants to this political process? And not that it really matters, but so that people know where I come from on this stuff, I'm going to just tell them what my political voting history is. And not that it really matters, but every time you bring this stuff up, it's part of the dynamic of today's world that, and I'll get into this in some of the comments we're going to make, is, oh, well, it's better than him or her. Well, it could have been him or her. Or, who gives a shit? You know, I'm talking about who's there now.
Right.
Today, who's in charge. And I don't care, because people have heard me say it a million times. I come from the party of hunting, fishing, and public access.
Yep.
I'm an equal opportunity supporter, and I'm an equal opportunity abuser. And as quick as you say, well, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, you have already said I'm not a public land advocate. I'm not a wildlife advocate.
Yeah. Well, then people just start seeing black and white. It drives me crazy. I mean, It's like there's no middle ground anymore.
No.
It's this, if someone makes up their mind immediately, Republican, Democrat, and they won't see outside of those lines.
Right.
You know, not everybody, I shouldn't say it, but it's just like, that's what you see in media. And
it's far more common today than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Let's just say it that way. And I can say that because I'm old and gray. But your observation of it is correct. It's when you say I'm a conservative or I'm a liberal, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat or I'm to the left or I'm to the right, as quick as you say that, you are saying this is the lens through which I look at issues. And when you want to get right down to the tags of saying I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, you're saying that's the team I play for.
Yeah, and it's amazing how people have this unwillingness to communicate with the other side too. Yeah. It's almost like, oh, well, you're this, so I'm going to boycott everything that you do.
Right.
And it's like, what? Now, what's the point of that? Like, now, that doesn't solve anything.
It solves nothing.
Yeah.
It furthers the divide. It plays right into the hands of the side that wants to see division. Mm-hmm. There are people on our issues who benefit and want to see division for the sake of their benefit. They want us to be divided and how, you know, like I'm just doing this Google search while we're here. I should have done it beforehand, but it's the classic example. So, Republican Party National Platform Plank, last election, had this to say about public lands. And instantly, because I'm picking on a Republican plank right now, I've already divided people.
Right.
Because they are aligned with the D or the R. Some people just are.
Mm-hmm.
So they have in their platform plank it says right here, I'm reading it. Immediately pass universal legislation providing the timely and orderly mechanisms requiring the federal government to convey certain federally controlled public lands to the states. We call it state transfer.
Yep.
That's an example of a partisan group dragging one of our issues into the partisan arena. We didn't ask for that. We didn't ask a party, hey, why don't you guys come up with some strategy that is a train wreck for public lands? And we've done, a 16 video series about all the problems with state trust lands.
Transferring federal lands to the states, right, and how that would be a horrible idea.
Right. And the reason it's a horrible idea, we've explained in all these videos, but I'll just quickly tell you, as much as all of us kind of want smaller government, the Western state land boards are not like what you think of your DNR back in the Midwest or back in the Northeast. Colorado, that's always the easy example. 23 million acres of BLM and Forest Service land that right now we can shoot. We can go and recreational shoot.
Yep.
We can hunt. We can fish. We can camp. We can hike.
Mm-hmm.
Under this idea that the Republicans put in their platform, that 23 million acres, if transferred to the Colorado State Land Board, the only way you'd be able to do any of those things I just mentioned, hunt, fish, hike, camp, shoot, is if you went to whoever the lessee is of those now state-owned or state-managed 23 million acres.
Yeah.
So you transfer it from the BLM and Forest Service to the Colorado State Land Board. You no longer get to do that unless you can convince the lessee.
Right. And that's not in every state, but
right.
I mean, the moral of the story
example.
is state land is not public land.
Exactly.
It's
on the websites of, and Colorado used to say on their website, and it's funny, until we did the Colorado video about this, it used to say that public land or state trust lands in Colorado are not public lands as you think of BLM or Forest Service lands. Something to that effect. These are not public lands.
Yeah.
Some guy from the state land board emails me and says, where did you get this information? I email him back and say, here it is on your website. About 3 days later, their website was changed. But now, Arizona and New Mexico still say, and Utah still say the same thing. These are not public lands.
Yeah. So I mean, in a lot of states, you can use them with if you pay a certain fee,
or whatever.
This or that. But the thing is that it can easily change, and it's not like your BLM or Forest Service land. It's different.
Right. So, like Wyoming. You can hunt it by virtue of the fact you have a hunting license, but you can't camp there.
Yeah.
New Mexico, you can't camp there.
Yeah, and I hope that we've driven this point home enough that I think most of the listeners probably have heard it and understand.
Right.
But, I mean, it's still...
So the point is something very damaging to hunting access, fishing access, public lands, i.e. transferring these lands to state land boards of the West, became a partisan issue as quick as the Republicans said, we're going to make that part of our party plank.
Mm-hmm.
So now we analyze, how do we address that issue? Okay. People who say I'm a Democrat, they're like, yeah, sons of bitches. For them, it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
For those of us who are not affiliated with a party, or they say I'm a Republican, how are you going to handle that?
Yeah.
Are you beholden to the Republican Party and an idea they have that's really stupid?
I would hope not.
Or are you going to stand up and say something about it?
Yeah.
Because if you become an apologist and make excuse and try to bullshit me and blow smoke up my skirt that there's some positive rationale for hunters, anglers, and public lands related to transferring to state land boards, you're kidding yourself. You are no longer an advocate for wildlife, wild places, public land, public access. Mm-hmm. You are a partisan. So don't be an apologist and try to tell me you're an advocate. And I could say the same thing. Let's use an issue about, The Democratic Party often has issues about closing areas to shooting or, whatever it might be on gun issues or ammo issues or whatever. And people say, well, how does that affect conservation? Well, if you look at the Pittman-Robertson funding, that applies to all ammunition. Mm-hmm. It doesn't just apply to hunting ammunition.
Yep.
And with the huge pulse that all state agencies have received in the last 10 years in Pittman-Robertson funding, the majority of that came from non-hunting ammo and rifle and handgun sales. Mm-hmm. So we start doing things over on that side that hurt conservation. Mm-hmm. That Pittman-Robertson, whether you want to admit it, is one of the key funding mechanisms for state-based conservation.
Yeah, for sure.
So when that stuff happens on the other side, and people say, well, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, so this is why I'm for it or against it. You should be for it or against it because of what it represents to hunting, fishing, and public access. And don't make any apologies for it if it's a dumb idea.
Yep.
It drives me nuts. And this whole public land debate is surrounded by people who are apologists. And they want to say, well, I'm a hunter or I'm this or I'm that. All right. So let's use a different example. Is there anything wrong with advocating for we need the highest standards for protection of fish and wildlife habitat as we extract resources on public lands? It seems pretty logical to me.
Yeah.
Right? Let's not degrade the habitat and then pass it on to the next generation in some degraded form. Why is that a left or right R or D issue? It's, in my mind, it's not. Mm-hmm. So when we get into these debates, it might be oil and gas, it might be whatever. I use gas. This is when someone self-identifies that they don't have have any explanation. They self-identify that they're an apologist, not an advocate. When they go to me and say, "Oh, well, you don't drive a car? Huh? You don't use any gas, huh?" That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I do use these resources and I want to pay the true cost of what they require to extract them.
Yep. Not at the cost of losing wildlife and habitat and land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so don't come to me with some second grader bullshit answer like that, because when you do, I instantly write you off. Or someone should write me off. If I came with that answer, let me restate it this way. If that's all the answer I could come up with about why we need lower air quality or lower water quality or lower habitat standards, if my only response to somebody is, "Oh, well, you don't drive a car. Oh, you don't heat your house with gas, with energy," I hope somebody would call me out for being the fool I am. It's not that simple. If there's anything that's made America great, it's that we have protected the integrity, for the most part, of our air, our water, and our public lands.
Yeah.
And we didn't get there by being apologists.
Yeah. Well, and like you were telling this to me before the podcast started, the oil and gas industries don't need hunters to advocate their cause.
Yeah.
Hunter, I mean, that's not, they have people for that, right?
Right.
I mean,
whatever industry it is, I don't care if it's the oil and gas industry, the technology industry, you name it, energy industry, I don't care. You just name an industry. Something that's going to have an impact on wildlife, wild places, clean air, clean water. Trust me, they've already got their advocates.
yeah.
They've got people in D.C. lobbying. They got people in state legislatures lobbying.
Yeah.
And they're hoping, their greatest dream is that we become apologists, accommodators, that we don't do what Roosevelt told us to do. Stand and speak for the wildlife and its habitat.
Yeah. Yeah. We as hunters need to be the lobbyists and the advocates for wildlife and their habitats.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't need to feel bad When you stand and say, you know what? I use all these resources. I benefit from this technology or this economic activity. But I expect it to be done in a manner that does not pass on a train wreck to my kids and my grandkids. Mm-hmm. I want to pay those costs. I want to pay the true costs of these resources. And then you get the people who say, oh, well, you know how much stuff would cost? Well, if we aren't paying the true cost, somebody is subsidizing it today, tomorrow, or 10 years, 20 years down the road.
Yeah, and I mean, that comes in many forms of, I mean, are we passing on that cost to another country or another landscape? Well, there's always the not in my backyard scenario.
Yeah, that's a perfect example, Marcus. So the United States, in our trade policy, we love to bring in low-cost resources from other places that have lower environmental standards. So what do we do in that process? We are exporting jobs. We are exporting environmental, clean air, clean water, habitat issues to other countries so that we can have lower cost resources. That's really what our trade policy on a lot of these things do.
Yeah.
It doesn't eliminate the costs, the burdens, the liabilities. It just pushes them somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want it in my backyard. I don't want it in my community, in my country. Really? I want it in my country. I want those jobs in my country. But I want them done in a way that's sustainable and helps the future of whatever it is. The clean air, clean water. You think about, okay, it would cost more to do it right, per se.
Yeah.
Good. Then it's going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And if it's sustainable, we're going to have jobs that don't have this boom and bust cycle. People can plan on a mine running for 50 years or 100 years. They can plan on whatever resource industry it is, being there, being predictable, being stable, rather than, we're going to compete at the lowest cost possible. We're going to open our borders to all this importation of resources that compete from other countries.
Yeah.
BS. I'm not there. And that's where it gets to this whole argument of advocacy versus apologist. And I think everybody on every issue, we got to ask ourselves, are we going to be an advocate for wildlife, wild places, wild things? Or are we going to be an apologist for something that fits our bias or benefits our self-interest? And I'm saying that about myself. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I get drawn into these discussions all the time. And I don't know, maybe it's part of getting old. I have zero interest in handing your generation, Marcus, you are a generation later than me. I have zero interest of handing you guys more problems. My generation's already handing you $100 trillion of unfunded promises that you guys are going to have to pay for someday. I'm handing you yet to be declared or determined liabilities for taking care of my health issues and taking care of my retirement and taking care of a million other things. Last thing I want to do is hand you guys further problems in the form of dirtier air and dirtier water.
Yeah.
And unproductive landscapes. So, I don't know. I'm sure that I've tried to... I've tried to say it in a way that makes people understand that you can't be an advocate and an apologist.
Yeah.
What are you? Are you speaking for, as Roosevelt said, the wildlife and its habitat? Or are you speaking for something else?
Mm-hmm. Should we dive into some more specific issues?
If you got them.
The hot one right now, or
what's the hot one?
Recently,
what's
anyway,
the hottest one?
The review of the national monuments.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess we have to. Hal Herring, who's been on our podcast before, who writes for Field and Stream, he's got some of the greatest insight on this stuff because he won't just accept someone's answer. He gets in his car, gets on a plane, and he flies or drives to wherever, and he just goes to coffee shops, and he talks to locals. He wants, what's the real story here?
Yeah.
So Hal is always one of those guys I call and say, Hal, what's your impression of this? Because he's going to bend my mind in a way that I had not seen it before. I can assure you, every time I talk to Hal Herring, my mind gets tweaked a little bit in a manner that I would not have thought of. So, this whole monument thing is one of those kind of issues. He's got great perspectives on it. I have my perspectives. And so when this whole monument issue came up, I mean, let's face it, it was all hell broke loose, for lack of a better term, here in the West. And I wrote out on our Hunt Talk forum last year at this time when those monuments were being designated. Unfortunately, and when I say unfortunately, what I wrote was whether these places need protection or not, whether they should be a large expanse or a small expanse. It was the two monuments in question were Bears Ear in Utah and Gold Butte in Nevada. And another one that was being considered was the Grand Canyon Watershed National Monument in northern Arizona. Regardless of their needed protections or it could be smaller, could be bigger, anyone with 2 cents of brains could look at that and say, you know what? If President Obama does this as he's walking out the door, now that the Utah delegation has what I will call the keys to the bus on public land policy, this is going to be a train wreck. And a political train wreck. I'm not saying one way or the other of whether the lands did or didn't need protection. But anyone involved in this had to look at it at the time and say, you know what? This is like the sharpest stick in the eye you could ever poke. Because now the ideology of anti-public land has all 3 houses in Congress, or both houses in Congress, and to some degree the White House. You can look for attacks on the Antiquities Act. You're going to see attacks on the Endangered Species Act, on the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. You didn't have to be Einstein to see that coming. But back to the whole monument thing. So that is what brought forth this request for a review of the national monuments. And for me, regardless of how you felt about the review process, regardless of how you feel about how they were, I guess, shrunk, because Bears Ear and the Grand Staircase Escalante, which is a monument, again, in southern Utah, that President Clinton had used the Antiquities Act to create. So monuments, most of the time they're created by the president using the powers of the Antiquities Act, an act in 1906 that Theodore Roosevelt used to create the Grand Canyon. I mean, it's been used a lot by presidents on all sides to create national monuments and protect other treasures.
Yeah.
So the 2 in question were in Utah. And Utah has a delegation that is the most hostile delegation you could ask when it comes to public lands and public land policy. And the current administration has said, Utah, we're going to give you the keys to the gate. But we want you guys to line up and be good soldiers on immigration and tax reform and blah, 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 blah. That's what is really a bigger problem for me as someone who's engaged in this stuff way more than I probably should be, some days way more than I want to be. What worries me is that the current administration has given the reins of public land policy in the West to the Utah delegation. That was the deal that was really made. And it expressed itself in how the 2 Utah monuments got reduced.
Yeah.
You notice how the Upper Missouri Monument here in Montana, that didn't get reduced.
Montanans were not happy about that.
No,
idea.
in Montana, if you came and said that we're going to get rid of the Upper Missouri National Monument, the greatest sheep hunting in the lower 48, I think we can say without any doubt the greatest bighorn sheep hunting in the lower 48 is in the National Monument of the Upper Missouri. I think we can say there's some tremendous elk and deer hunting there. There's a lot of wildlife values there. Can you imagine if they said we're going to get rid of those protections and we're going to start punching roads and whatever it might be?
Yeah, and it wasn't just the hunters who were, I mean, obviously there's a lot of other people, recreational users of that area that got fired up about that too.
Yeah. And so a couple of reasons of bringing that forward, stating it in that way, is every one of these monuments need to be looked at through the eyes of us as advocates for hunting, fishing, and public access. It's not necessarily one size fits all. Mm-hmm. And when it happens and it looks like it could be detrimental to hunting and fishing and public access, you better stand up and say something about it.
Yeah, and Utah does not have a good track record of
no
of doing that.
Congressman Chavitz, what was his bill this time last year? House Bill 621.
Oh yeah, the law enforcement.
Well, that was 622. So he had
right.
621, disposal of public lands.
Yeah,
he had 622, which was eliminate the funding for the law enforcement parts of BLM and Forest Service.
Which is just carving away at.
Yeah, and block grant it to the states, to the local counties. And the list of bad public land legislation that is sponsored by Utah delegation members is, we wouldn't have time to list it all here.
Yeah, and that's why handing them the keys is
a train wreck.
Yeah.
So to me, the two monuments, the Bear's Ear and Grand Staircase, that's the fact that it went down this path was somewhat predictable because you could see it coming. Mm-hmm. But the fact that it was almost like, hey, we're going to give the Utah delegation everything they want, to me, that's more disturbing. So now what are we seeing? We're seeing the administration say, oh, we're going to review these state-based sage grouse plans. Why? Because one state in the West did not like the sage grouse plans. Governor Meade from Wyoming led the charge. He's a Republican. Governor Bullock from Montana, a Democrat, was right there with him. You look across the West, whether it was Republican governors or Democratic governors, these states came up with some really, really good sage grouse plans. Mm-hmm. I mean, you worked on sage grouse for years. Many summers, didn't you? A couple summers?
Yeah, three
summers you were doing sage grouse studies. Mm-hmm. You know there's issues out there that sage grouse have.
For sure.
And there's human changes that can help.
Yep. Yeah, no, and they, a lot of people have been taking proactive measures to try to stop the decline and figure out what's going on. And
these state-based plans were a collaboration of the state agencies, mm-hmm. the producers, the private landowners. It wasn't just somebody saying, oh, we're going to do this and you're going to do what we tell you.
Yeah.
These were very complicated, multi-year plans, collaborative efforts, a lot of compromise. And we dodged the bullet in September of 2016, when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service said, you know what, these state plans look like they're going to work. Maybe it was 15. Anyhow, Secretary Jewell at the time said, we're going to let the states do this. It looks like it could work. Mm-hmm. It's governors of all persuasions. It's state legislatures of all persuasions, except one group, Utah. So now, what is happening at the Department of Interior? U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a division under the Department of Interior, has decided they're going to reopen or review, I guess is their term, these sage grouse plans. Not because anyone in the West wants it, other than Utah, but because the deal has been made. Utah, you guys be good soldiers on everything else, and we'll let you carry out your crazy anti-public land, whatever you want, term you want to put on it, policy. And as someone who lives in Montana, who enjoys the entire West, I don't want to be treated as a colony of the Empire of Utah.
No.
And in fact, that's what's happening here. And for the life of me, I'm still at a quandary about, I know so many great people in Utah. I know so many serious hunters and anglers from Utah. I just scratch my head and say, where is this disconnect? Because, I mean, we've had some of them on our podcast. We've had some of them on shows. The Utah guys who are they are wonderful people who do so much themselves for their volunteer and their advocacy, and they put their money where their mouth is.
Well, yeah, I hope people aren't mistaking like all of Utah is bad. It's certain politicians in Utah that
somehow
are crazy.
Somehow when it comes to public lands, Utah is its own world.
Yeah.
And I have no idea. Hal Herring, the reason I brought Hal up earlier, is he's been and talked to a lot of these people. And he has a different perspective on it. And we were hoping to have Hal on the podcast, but between blizzards and 30 below weather and stuff, we've not been able to connect with Hal. But I'm interested in his perspectives because he's went there and talked to so many people.
Yeah.
So to me, that is really the bigger issue. The monument thing is like the shiny object of distraction. Yeah, it's important. The whole process, did it get input? What does it say when you get 2 million comments and what was it, 98% of them said don't touch it, but you touch it and you do whatever. I don't know. I don't know enough about Bears Ear and Grand Staircase to say one way or the other. What I do know is the process did not look transparent. It did not look like it had much balance to it.
No. Yeah.
It looked highly political.
And it got people riled up. I mean, it
did.
There was a lot going on, social media and news, everything. I mean, people were...
Yeah, and a couple ancillary points to that is, and I know this is going to piss some people off too, but I'm going to say it. I love the fact that Patagonia has jumped into the fray actively on public land issues.
Yeah, they had a lot of good things to say.
Right.
They're putting out a lot of positive
I don't
messaging.
know any Patagonia gear, but the flip side of that is if you're going to jump into the fray and you want to be the big player, you better have your facts straight. And when Patagonia and whoever it was in their PR, marketing, communication group, whatever it is, says something like the president stole your land, which is blatantly incorrect, false. I don't know if it was intentional, if it was misinformed, whatever it was. It is a serious hit to the credibility of being a public land advocate.
Yeah. It's very misleading way to say things.
Yeah,
it wasn't accurate at all. Yeah.
No, and Patagonia needs to be called out and say, you know what, guys, gals, if you're going to jump in and be part of this, great. But we can't hold the anti-public land, anti-conservation crowd to a threshold of being accurate and complete and thorough. And then us do, the pro-public land crowd do something that isn't complete, that isn't accurate.
Yeah.
And there's been a few of those instances where I read it, I'm like, so there goes the credibility factor.
Yeah. Because the important, the thing with that is that nobody stole your land. It was a change in designation of land.
Exactly.
Right?
That's
it's still public land.
Right.
A lot of the same thing. Same things go on there. You can still go out there and all this, but it's just a different designation. And whether it was good or bad, there's a lot of negative things that could happen because of changing designations, but it's not privatization of public lands or anything like that. That's what it implied. By putting
to me,
that out there.
that is the issue.
Yeah.
Is if you want to jump in there and you want to be part of it, great. We need the public lands, wildlife, clean air, clean water, needs every advocate they can get. But don't have your biggest announcements, your biggest press releases have big holes in them.
Yeah.
Be factually incorrect, because they later came out with another statement about, I think it was a statement to Congressman Rob Bishop from Utah, who chairs the House Natural Resources Committee, where they said something about this large loss of public land. No, it is not. Transferring it from National Monument status back to Bureau of Land Management unprotected land is not a loss of public land. So I said I was going to smile in all this, Marcus. Am I smiling?
Yeah, for the most part.
All right. So I think we've kind of covered the need to be correct and hold all sides to a level of accountability for correctness.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to say that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then I want to go back to a little bit on the monument side, because it's going to lead us into the idea we talked about, that I've talked about with other people, and this is land designation categories.
Yeah.
So when I was in Arizona at the time this whole announcement on the monument thing happened, I was pretty much out of service, because we were filming an elk hunt on the south rim of the Grand Canyon that was part of the Grand Canyon Watershed National Monument proposal that was put in front of President Obama to sign as he went out the door also. Mm-hmm. And most of you who know me know that I love backpack hunting. I go look for quote unquote sanctuaries away from motorized roads and trails and blah, blah, blah. Well, I've also been really, really lucky that I've hunted elk multiple times in the areas that would have been part of the Grand Canyon National Watershed, mostly units 9 and 10 in Arizona. I've been lucky. I've hunted mule deer. This year, we hunted mule deer on the Kaibab Plateau, units 12, 12A, and 12B. Mm-hmm. I've drawn the Arizona Strip, which is mule deer unit 13A is what I had, but it's combined units 13A and B. So I've been really lucky to get to spend a lot of time there. The number of elk tags I've had there, I think I've been on 5 elk hunts in units 9 and 10. Between
you and
me
friends.
and tags other friends I've had. One thing you quickly realize is that landscape without water from human water sources would have no wildlife. It's that dry. I mean, you saw it when we were deer hunting.
Yeah.
Game and Fish was actually having to haul water to places.
Right.
Because they'd had no rain since September. We were there in November. And the deer they had nothing to drink.
Yeah, and that's just, I mean, a lot of that's due to the fact that humans have altered the landscape in so many ways that the water's just not available anymore in those places.
Right. I mean, you take all of the conditions where things have changed from human pressure. We'll go back to what we talked about with the wild sheep. We have pinyon juniper encroachment.
Which takes water off the...
That is... Those might look pretty from a far distance, but they're an absolute water hog. Mm-hmm. So there goes a huge amount of your traditional historic surface water that wildlife used to use.
And is that from, I mean, and I'm not sure about a lot of this, but is that some from fire suppression and just altered landscape uses over the years?
Most people would attribute it to fire suppression.
Right.
It used to have a fire cycle. Before cheatgrass, it had a different timing of the fire cycle. Okay. And when it would come back, it wouldn't come back with cheatgrass. It would come back with sage and forbs and other native plants. Well, we don't like fire in this country. We use terms like inferno and deathly and whatever to describe a natural process called fire. So we suppress it like crazy.
Yeah.
And what happens? Well, you end up with huge expanses of pinyon juniper, which suck the water out of the landscape.
Yeah, and then like you mentioned too, with cheatgrass now in a lot of those areas, if you do reintroduce fire through prescribed burns or if this happens naturally, then you have the problem of cheatgrass coming back.
Takes over.
And then you have a whole nother problem.
Yeah, because cheatgrass has the competitive advantage right after a fire. Cheatgrass will outcompete all of the native vegetation, and that's what you will end up with. Mm-hmm. So we got that invasive species. We got burros there that are, again, nothing against burros.
Using a ton of the resource.
Yeah. It's there's X amount of resources that get allocated to wildlife. And if burros are taking some of it, it's less for wildlife. It's just that simple.
Yep.
So we have all that. We have, again, some people can't call it climate factors. They got to call it something else. So we'll use long-term extended drought. Okay. All of these things combined, there is no remaining water that is at a level of consistency and quantity to sustain the wildlife in the greater Grand Canyon, what would have been this Grand Canyon Watershed National Monument. So when I looked at that proposal, I said, this is a train wreck for wildlife, because it was going to close a lot of roads. It was going to change a lot of things. And these roads are what are used to haul water, to maintain the infrastructure, to do what's needed to keep water on the landscape for wildlife. Mm-hmm. You close all those roads, how are you going to maintain water catchments? How are you going to do whatever is needed for wildlife? The reality is you're not. Mm-hmm. And so what's going to happen to wildlife in that scenario? You're not going to have wildlife. It's just it's that simple. So I was a very vocal critic of the Grand Canyon Grand Canyon Watershed National Monument. And so being a heavy critic of that, some people are like, oh, Newberg, you've lost your mind. Arizona Game and Fish came out against it. They knew what that would mean to wildlife and hunting. If we could roll back the hands of time and 330 million people leave this country and restore the landscape as they leave, then maybe it makes sense.
And so my reaction to that too is like, well, okay, so if we're gonna, the fact that we know that, like putting it into a national monument, it'd be nice to have the protections that come along with that, but still be able to maintain these water catchments so we can have wildlife too.
Right.
And so I guess that probably brings you into your next idea that you brought up to me.
Yeah, my next idea is, and this isn't my idea, this is a lot of people been talking about this in their circles I run in, and I hope that it stirs conversation among listeners, is we need a new landscape designation. We had the big W, as some people call it, wilderness. Mm-hmm. Full, complete protection. It's everything you could possibly think of to protect. No roads, no mechanized anything. It's as strong as an effort has ever been made to try keep landscapes as they are without damage or
yeah. Well, and they definitely have a place. I mean, I'm very grateful for certain wilderness areas.
We hunted 3 wilderness areas this year.
Yeah.
And if Wyoming didn't have that crazy law against non-residents hunting in wilderness areas, we would have hunted a 4th wilderness area.
Yeah.
So, but we have so many lands that are maybe not suited for full-blown wilderness protection, but are critical to wildlife, critical to hunting and fishing and watersheds that need some level of protection. Mm-hmm. So is it time that we come up with a new category, a new land classification that's, you can call it conservation management area or whatever, wildlife priority area. I don't care what name you want to give it, but there was a bill that made it through Congress. One of the most, I think, maybe there's been some since then, but I think this was in 14. It's the Rocky Mountain Front Heritage Act. Mm-hmm. And it grandfathered all existing uses, grazing and, whatever it was. And in the trade-off, changed some things, released some places out of wilderness study areas, created a little bit more wilderness area on the right next to an existing wilderness area. But what it did, it created some areas that it said the highest priority will be the management of wild native habitats and native species. So it's not like this hasn't ever been thrown out there before.
Right.
But it just seems like we're at that point of gridlock on public lands where we got to come up with something else that gives the voice to wildlife and their habitat.
And can you explain like why monuments don't fill that niche for that land designation?
Because monument categorization or classification a lot of times won't necessarily have those protections, or they will have protections like some of the areas in Arizona where they've tried to go in and maintain water sources. And it's like, no, can't do that. Some of them are of the quote unquote, let nature take its course. And I'm kind of saying that wrong. But when you have invasive weed species, that the only way to control them is through mechanical treatment. Mm-hmm. You can't just turn your head to that. The proposal of the Grand Canyon Grand Canyon Watershed National Monument, that would have closed so many roads that are important for wildlife water infrastructure.
Right.
So I don't think that monument designations necessarily have wildlife and habitat as the highest priority.
Okay.
It might have other reasons.
That makes sense. And so in this like hypothetical land designation, then you could still allow for
everything,
manipulation of the land and habitat, but as it benefits wildlife and the health of the landscape.
Yeah. If you want to have logging or grazing or timber or mining, whatever, you can, if it fits within the confine of what's best for wildlife and its habitat. I mean, I'm sure this is a pipe dream.
Yeah.
But the discussion has been out there. TRCP, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partners, has been one of the people who's floated that idea a couple times.
Gotcha.
And I just think we're at that time where the low-hanging fruit has been picked as it comes to habitat, quote-unquote, protections through land designation. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many millions of acres we have in wilderness study areas. They've been in wilderness study areas now for 30 some years.
And so you're like, some of those areas are kind of stuck in limbo. They're not going to be pushed into designated wilderness. But,
right.
Okay.
And so there's the competing idea that says, oh, they've never gained enough support that they should be wilderness. Let's remove all protections. Well, obviously they became WSA's wilderness study areas because they have some value, some wildlife, some characteristic that seems to be important. Should we be thinking about a designation that gets there? That's an example. I'm not saying just WSA's, but I'm talking about all critical areas.
Yeah.
WSA's probably are one of those kind of places that if they're not suitable for the big W, the wilderness, they probably have some other values that need protecting. So what is that other classification that makes wildlife and habitat the priority?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't have the answer to it, Marcus, but it's just...
No, I mean, obviously who knows what it would look like, but, hypothetically, it seems like a good idea.
Yeah. And I still think we need to introduce some candidates to the party of hunting, fishing, and public access and get them in D.C.
Yeah?
Yeah. Because I think people got the idea that I'm tired of the R and the D, the conservative, liberal, the left, the right.
Right.
Because none of those, very seldom do those, however you want to make that opposing polar viewpoint, very seldom do they say, let's put down the knives and let's work on something together.
Bring back the Bull Moose Party, right?
Yeah. I've advocated that on podcasts before. The Bull Moose Party in 2020.
All right.
So, I don't know. We're in an interesting time.
Yeah.
But through our platforms, through, however many years of doing this, I've had the benefit of being engaged in a lot of this stuff. And a trend that's starting to worry me is the amount of times I see people who I know they love wildlife. I know they love wild places. I know they love hunting and fishing and public access. But sometimes through their silence, they become at least accommodators. And sometimes through what they say to rationalize things that are damaging to wildlife and public lands, they almost become an apologist. And it's hard because you know their heart's in the right place. And I hope if ever I become one of those apologist accommodators that someone rips me a new one. I don't care if they do it via email, phone call, whatever. There's nothing. I mean, when you get to be old like I am, and people, this is funny. I've been talking about how old I am on a lot of our stuff lately. And so many people who are in their 60s are like, quit talking about being old. You haven't even got started yet. And then you get emails from people in their 20s and 30s like, yeah, you're older than my dad or whatever. It's like, but when you get to a certain age, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. At least for me, at this age, I have zero concern about I might have offended somebody. They'll get over it. I have zero concern about, hey, I took a risk and I spoke up, and maybe I should have said it a little differently, but, you know, that is what it is. All of those are risks I'm willing to take to do what will allow your generations and the next generations to have the same amazing hunting, fishing, and public access that I had. And that's all that drives me at this point in time.
Yeah.
There's no amount of love or money that's going to get me to have a focus or a priority of anything other than what's best for hunting, fishing, and public access. All
right.
Can we say that? No, it's the hard part about having these discussions, and I always worry about it, and it's why I've kind of strayed away from some of the heavy political stuff of the last. I would say in our podcast, it's been 6 months since we really got into the weeds of politics. And part of that is I don't want to wear people down. I don't want to wear us down grinding on it and worrying about it. But you also can't neglect it and ignore it because it's going on. Those who are not friendly to our cause, they're not going to give up. They're not going away.
No.
They're not giving it a rest.
Yeah. Well, you gotta balance your time between actually enjoying these lands and giving yourself a reason to care about them so much.
Yeah.
And then also advocating for them and protecting them.
Yeah. And you've heard me say this in a lot of our content lately, and I'm going to keep hammering it home because I've learned this from some real remarkable people. I mean, Jack Atchison Sr. just passed away this week. He's a world-renowned hunting outfitter from Butte, Montana. And whether you live in Montana or you travel here for a lot of our beautiful things, the fishing access, him and Tony Shunan Sr. and a few others, if it weren't for them, we would not have our stream access law in Montana. We would not have the right to use our state lands for hunting and recreation in Montana. And so I think about those people and how much they did. And it almost becomes incumbent on you as a hunter and an angler that, you know what? You're going to have to stand and be counted when the time comes. Look what Jack did. Look at Tony did. Look, I mean, the list goes on. And I'm sure everybody in their state or their community has those kind of people who've done remarkable things that we all benefit from today. It's interesting stuff. You got to you got to tell me though, Marcus. I count on you and a few others to tell me when I'm going off the rails here.
All right. I'll let you know. No, I think this is good. I mean, advocating for public lands is what started this whole operation, right? I mean,
it is. That is what started this. Me and Mark Hervinen and a few other people got the idea that, you know what, you could make a difference if you started a platform that revolved around public land hunting, self-guided public land hunting. Man, was that a crazy idea when we first started stewing that around in 2004. I think Mark and I first discussed the issue in 2002 or 3. He and I were board members of a group Jim Posowitz founded, Orion the Hunters Institute. Mm-hmm. And we'd talk about it, and finally, through a whole course of events we've explained on this podcast before, 2008, we got this crazy idea. The opportunity was right. The timing was wrong, but the opportunity was right. And so we did it, and here we are, hopefully making a difference, trying our little bit to make a difference. And if nothing else, if we don't make a difference, at least people know where we stand.
Yeah, I hope that you are, and I hope that I can help.
Oh, you're doing a huge part.
And I think you definitely have had an impact. I mean, there's no doubt about that over the years. And it's been positive. Positive things have happened for public lands and wildlife because of these platforms, and
yeah,
I think it'll continue that way, and hopefully we can continue to produce like exciting, but also content that does advocate and inspire and all of those things.
Hopefully people understand that we like you'd said, we want people to go out and enjoy it. We want you to build the passion and the appreciation for it, but there just is the time where you're going to have to stand up and do it. And you hear me talk about conservation, and this is where I was starting when I got distracted about Jack Atchison. It's never easy. Every conservation accomplishment, whether it's adding something new to the big picture or protecting something that's already part of the big picture, it's difficult. It is not easy. It's never convenient. It always seems to be the opportunities come at the wrong time. The threats or the dangers come from the wrong places. It just is inconvenient as hell. And it's never comfortable. And the comfortable part is one I've come to accept, is that if I'm going to stand up and speak on behalf of wildlife and its habitat, there's someone who's not going to like that. And if they're professional about it, we're going to say, you know what, we have a different perspective on this topic, and we're going to go buy each other a beer and, respect each other. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that respect of differences seems to be harder to find these days, but the fact that you just have to accept, if you're going to be an advocate, you have to accept the fact that you're going to be in uncomfortable positions at time where it's a coworker or a family member or whoever, someone you have a relationship with, is going to have a different opinion. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with that. Welcome to America.
Yeah.
Well, Marcus, it's just about dark here in the office. We've been spinning yarns for a long time.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate your time and appreciate all your work and your perspective. People don't know Mark. You're getting to know more and more Marcus's background. He grew up in Montana. He's been spoiled.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Living in Montana all of his life, but he's traveled and hunted and fished and skied, and you got a torn ACL to show for your crazy skiing. But his undergrad in wildlife really gives you a good perspective to all that we're doing, and then your master's program on film and communication is really helpful. So that's why you're kind of part of this equilibrium piece, Marcus. If Randy's getting way out there, you have every bit of right to kind of reel the slack out of the line before he hangs himself. So, but anyhow, thanks, Marcus. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I think we're going to be caught up here pretty soon, and you'll hear more podcasts coming. Travel safe. Travel safe. Travel safe. Travel safe. Travel safe. Travel safe.